All right, so um, before we get started, I just wanted to take a little time. I sent you all the draft minutes from the July meeting, and I wanted to kind of do a little bit of level setting around what we're doing and give you some other context around the letter and what more importantly, ultimately, what is a goal. So, as to the minutes, I'm sure you all read Brian's well summarized piece at the end where he talked about, you know, one of the things that the board really wants to do is be a provocateur and move this conversation around structural racism, funding for human services needs, and you know, policing, community policing, and the need for reform to the council. And so I think that that's something that we need to keep in mind as we think about this letter. Um, I think the other, other context to think about is ultimately what is the goal of what other parts of the goal do we need to consider as we look at this letter, and then also last night there was a presentation to council, and I'm not sure if you all had a chance to see it, uh, around the city's finances. And we currently have $11 million shortfall for 2020. And so when you think about the consequences of asking, 10%, what that'll mean for overall budget issues, and in particularly the public safety fund, including and up to the laying off of police officers and other public safety staff. So I think we just want to make sure that we think about what is the ultimate goal of this letter and what do we want to ensure that happens. And then I guess the last thing is what other options do we have as a board around how we move forward the conversation around equity and diversion and inclusion and ending racism in our own, for lack of a better word, our own home. So those are just things to think about as we move forward with this conversation. With that being said, I'd love to want to know how do you want me to pull up Madeline's letter, Deanne's letter? So I just kind of wanted to get from the board, want to open up for discussion, and then also guidance on how do we look at those letters or those revisions.
I mean, I think I would be in favor of looking at Madeline's letter first.
Yep. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna pull up yours first, Madeline.
Okay.
So it'll be on the screen here. So I'm gonna scroll back up and we'll just scroll down slowly. And so I'll give a chance to everybody to read.
That was a little too fast for me, Alberto.
Sorry.
Thanks.
I'll move it back.
So I really like that. Madeline. I think the only thing I'm worried about, based on the feedback, as I understood it from the meeting, was that there was a strong, I think that at least a couple of people really felt like we needed to completely separate the police aspect, which is not my view. But if that is the conscience of the group, then we probably need to address that first. Did you guys have a different impression than I did about that? Do you think everybody was on board with suggesting that the funding come from the police department?
I don't know that everybody was on board with it, but I felt like people were open to that, but just had some concerns about it. But maybe there were a couple of people that were hesitant to that.
Okay.
I thought they wanted, I didn't get the sense that they wanted to back away from that. I got the sense that they wanted us to be put more teeth in not demanding it, but be a little bit more direct in what we were asking. That was my take.
Okay. Well, then,
Could be wrong.
Yeah.
Could be wrong though. But
Yeah, I got it. I felt that there was at least a couple of board members that did not think that having a direct ask from the police was the best way to move forward. And to in all honesty, my concern is that, again, going back to the question about what is it that we want to achieve, is would doing that, would that make it a non-starter conversation at council?
Yeah. So I think the letter has two primary goals. One is to increase funding for human services.
right.
And second goal is to ask council and the community to consider the value proposition as a community where the money is, and that I think it's the conscience of this inflection point in society that funds be moved from the standard policing model into more of a human service model. And I think we have to put that in somewhere. And that's why, I like your edits, Madeline. I wonder, to satiate the people who are like, no, we can't attack the police, we add a clause in there that says, hey, our primary goal is to increase human service funding. If, we don't want to create a non-starter by bringing up the police department. But maybe we do. I mean, maybe, people just need to get over it. And
I mean,
Well, yeah, the majority of people were, there were a few people a couple of people that were very leaning very heavily towards not touching anything police related. But then I thought the majority, the rest of the group, basically said, they didn't disagree with them, but at the same time, they didn't stop us.
True.
So that brings up a good question. This letter says the board unanimously. Right?
Oh yeah, you can take that.
I think that's a great thing. Yeah, just take out the word unanimously,
Yeah,
and then all we need is a majority vote, and then we're good, right?
So
And
if that's the case, I'm sorry, go ahead, Alan.
No, I just said we did have a majority vote, but it wasn't. Yeah, that was just strike that. Well, because at the same time, the people that were still very sympathetic toward the police and not touching it, at the same time, they didn't absolutely say unequivocally, no, don't do that. They just said how they felt. And actually how they felt was no different than how we felt. They've done a great job, yes. And yeah, they've done a great job. And, if we're going to look at, defunding, but definition of what that means, then I didn't get the sense that they were just, I don't know. I didn't get the sense that they were like 100, no, you can't do this. Don't do that. Don't do this. They were like, well, they've done such a great job and da 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 da. And I don't know. I didn't get the sense that they were, I don't know. But yeah, you're to take unanimously out because they did voice concern. 2 people that
Well,
I
and
remember.
if I hope I'm not interrupting you, Madeline, but my thought was that if we end up getting unanimous vote on this, we can always move to amend the letter to include the word unanimous at the
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I'm not hung up on any part of this letter. I wrote it as a platform for a starting point, a springboard, so we didn't have to start at ground zero.
It's great. So yeah, I guess Aliberto, we could just take out the word unanimous, and if by chance it is unanimous, we'll add that back in.
That's easy.
And I think, the reading that Polly sent that that email and having some clarity around the funding, that a lot of the programs that people like about the police department, like LEAD and CORE and Angel Initiative, aren't funded with the money we're asking to be pulled from anyway, that it's grant funding those programs. So
Right.
as far as I can tell, all the programs people are like, this is great, we want the police department to keep doing, it's not attached to the general fund.
Oh,
Correct.
that's good. That's good.
Yeah, which means, so to this letter's point, right? I don't think it's a one size fits all solution approach that Longmont Public Safety provides. In other words, the LEAD and CORE are grant funded, and they do provide a different level of service than necessarily straight out police service that would come to a call. They do bring them in. So I want to be careful about that. I understand what you're saying, Madeline, that you get the police, but in Longmont, you get the police and
Right.
you get a mental health provider along with them. So I just want to make sure that we're careful about that. And again, I'm gonna go back to your point, Graham. So if can you speak a little more about that value proposition piece? I understand the increased housing, human services funding, but I'd like to learn a little more about what the increased value or the value proposition conversation is.
Right. So you can tell what people care about based on what they spend money on. You want to know where somebody's values are. Look at their checkbook or look at their bank statements, And I think it's all the more true with a society or the city of Longmont. Where do we put our money? And so I think I vaguely remember somebody reading in the meeting that there's like $25 million allocated to the police department, and that when there are budget cuts, that department doesn't get cut. And the community service and safety fund or whatever, I'm probably misnaming it, only got, like 300,000 or 400,000. And so to me, that signals a value proposition, or it tells me where this community, wants its energy, its money, its attention. And so I think this ask is not just about dollars. This ask is about saying this community values meeting the basic human needs of its people first and foremost. And that is inevitably going to reduce crime and increase safety and be a more genuine expression of, what we value, and that is taking care of each other. So,
okay. Well, so let me just say a couple of things. One is, and I don't know what I would need to go back and look at the public safety, because that $21 million may also include EMT and fire, because in Longmont, those are police, fire, and EMT are all combined.
So
okay.
I had some notes from the meeting. I don't know if these figures are correct, but I had written down that 21.5 million per year, but that including public safety, it was 53 million a year.
Right. So
That's
I
what,
don't,
yep.
yeah. And so I don't know that. I always look at, and then as far as our human service funding, we got 2.37 and we're looking at 2.7% of general fund. This year it was around 1 point, and I'm thinking I need to go back and look. I think it's a 1 point something million. And of course, half of that is going to homeless services, and then the other half went to the human services funding that we have, right? So I just want to make sure that it's much more than 300,000 or 400,000. That
Okay.
being said, I think it's important that we share that the board is very much committed to increasing human service funding. I just want to make sure that we know what we got our facts straight, as far as what our funding is.
Yeah, and I understand the drive and the burden to get, have informative, detailed information here, but I also feel like on some level that's city council's job to work that out, and that this is just, like Madeline said, a springboard to start the conversation. So maybe we lead the letter in with just saying, hey, human services needs more funding, and before COVID, but now it's all the more true. And we know this because we're having a needs assessment done, and preliminary top line reports show that we're headed into a crisis. And so it's time for, city council to send money to human services. And we think that it should come from the police department.
And right.
So if we perhaps focus on paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, paragraph 5.
Could you scroll down for us, Alberto?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Did you guys? Did I send you guys a letter?
No, just to me.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, yeah. I was thinking. Yeah, I didn't want to. I wanted
Right,
you to
yeah.
maintain decide how you wanted it distributed, but I don't have a problem if you want to share it.
Well, I think part of the issue is, and I don't understand the whole Colorado sunshine laws, but I think part of the issue is we want to make sure that, this is being done in like this, a noticed meeting. And you can have individual things, but if we're going to discuss something that's going to the board, I think we need to discuss it as a group that's, in a recorded meeting. So I think it's just trying to make sure that we stay in those boundaries. That's why I didn't send. That's why I asked him to send it to me, and then I could show it.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is that?
So I was thinking that what you were talking about would be more probably elaborated on that more in paragraph 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5. Talking about the underserved members of the community.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that says it. I think we need shorter is better.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So I think the other question that I would have for this group is, and maybe it is council's job, or maybe this group's job after this, but I have a concern about the work that police is doing, in particular with core and lead. I believe is what is mentioned in that first sentence. Trauma informed de-escalation and harm reduction. And then the question is, if not them, then who, in my mind.
So can we add a sentence there that says we recognize and encourage the police's work along the lines of Lead Core and Angel Initiative, and do not want to see funding pulled from those programs?
So if I can speak to that, that was actually in my letter. That's one of the things I added. So what I added in my letter was that we recognize that certain programs such as Lead Corn and the Angel Initiative are excellent programs which should not be terminated. And then I added in, however, council should explore whether these programs will be better operated by another department or by an outside nonprofit. Something like that, I think might work.
But Graham, did you say that the funds that support those programs are not associated with what we're asking for anyway, right?
Well, it is grant funding, but then Eliberto just said that it's police and so which leads me to believe that maybe they're, somebody who's on payroll for the police department spends 20 hours on a grant funded initiative that justifies their full-time employment. I guess I just don't know about the details there.
The details.
But yes, in general, yeah, they're funded by grants. Yeah. Am I wrong about that, Eliberto?
No, I think they are funded, and this is part of the challenge, right? I don't know details of how much of that funding for Core Lead is an Angel Initiative, how much of that is general fund or safety fund, public safety fund, and how much of it is grants. And so I think that's where it starts getting a little complicated to just do a blanket statement of 10%.
But I also think we're not really, like, that's council's job to sort of sort this out and figure out
Right.
where the funds may come from. Our purview to be able to figure that out in a letter. This, that's a huge project, right? Our job is just to make them have this conversation and get the ball rolling.
Right.
I think that the email that was forwarded from Council Member Christensen, I think, said that I thought it said 874,000 for those programs came from city funding, and the rest of the 2-point-something million was through grants. But I don't know the source of that funding. But regardless, obviously we don't want those programs to be terminated. Maybe we don't have to even reference those programs. I don't know.
I like the sentence you mentioned, that was in your letter. I think we can cut and paste that right in there and just say, hey, these are the kind of programs that we want to encourage. I think your sentence was right on, and that's the kind of policing and community service that we're looking for, not the violent, aggressive approach that we're trying to get away from. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good point. I think the other thing I would say is about Longmont PD and I think so. Recently, Madeline, your sister, and I haven't listened to all of it. I need to listen. And Mike Butler had a really good conversation, and so I just want to be careful that yes, no police force is immune from these issues. Longmont has been a longtime leader in really collaborative community policing. They've been recognized for many years, and a lot of it has to do with Mike, and so we want to make sure that work continues. So we can also think about what our role as a board is in the crafting the attributes for the next public safety chief piece. I just want to make sure that's not, again, I agree that no police force is immune from what we were talking about, and Longmont has years of working toward improving their community policing in collaboration with the community. So I want to be careful with that.
Do you think this, I don't interpret this letter to condemn this police department. I interpret this letter to say there are just things that police are not necessarily best trained to accomplish. And if we transfer funding to people who are better trained to do those things, everybody will be better off, including the police. But I don't know, maybe that's just because that's my own bias in reading this letter. I will also throw in too that, one of the things I had suggested at the meeting and that I had added into my letter, and maybe this was just me, and if it was, I'm not going to belabor this, but I had suggested that we consider asking the council to request feedback from groups to see what their experiences are with the police. and my goal on that was twofold, right? Like I already believe these things are happening, and to a lesser extent in Longmont, because I think Longmont has a better police force than some places like, say, Aurora, right? But I think that other people need to be convinced of these problems, and one of the ways you convince people is to show them how other people that don't mirror them are experiencing things. So I thought that was one way that council could perhaps have their eyes opened or open members of the public's mind to some of the issues that are problematic with policing. But I'm not stuck on that idea of them doing that. And as I said at the meeting, I do think as a white person, have a tendency probably to overly study things instead of just getting it done and pushing the envelope. So maybe throwing in a request to do some community information gathering is a bad idea because it might sort of slow things down. I don't know.
I think maybe we have a call to action section at the end of the letter that says, here are the call to action points. And maybe one of those is, solicit feedback from the company about their interaction with the police department. And another one is, analyze the budget of the police department. And, there's a couple other ways. I mean, maybe just to couch all these things we feel like should be added to the letter without feeling tied to just stuff it into the prose and still make it flow, right? Because when you just the more you edit some of these things, the crazier they get. So maybe if we just have a call to action section where, if you need just a bullet point, here's what we're asking the council to do, pull money from police and evaluate the situation, all that.
Well, I wonder so I guess my question is, again, I've been pretty straightforward, and I'm concerned about, that that second paragraph is how far will they read beyond that before dismissing it. So maybe if we say something like, and that call to action, what you just said, Graham, analyze the budget and see where, if that's possible, or where would it be possible, and would that give it more of an opportunity to be a conversation starter?
I think there's a high value in ensuring this letter makes people uncomfortable, that it is intentionally unpalatable. And I don't know, what do you think, Madeline?
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
A heightened or too much of they need to be uncomfortable. They really do. I think that's what they meant when they said we needed to put more teeth in it, and I think that's what Karen was alluding to. And I just know that based on my experience and many of these kinds of things, says that you get one shot. So if we got to go in and do a bang, from Jump Street, and then otherwise it will get pushed off, and and then for us to bring it up later, it's not going to have the same value. So Graham, to answer your question, yeah, absolutely. So I don't know, there may be, based on how I structured it, perhaps you may want to reverse paragraphs here.
The first and the second?
Yeah, the bottom. Go to the bottom. I can't even get okay, here we go. Let me pull up my copy here. We strongly believe that the repurposing of funds would be a major opportunity for cooperation, and I believe between the police and the community. Somehow, that's more of a summation. To keep in line with what we're saying, maybe some of the stronger points were made at the end rather than the beginning. I don't know. What do y'all think?
I mean, the letter's only it's only one page, right? Like, is council really going to read the first paragraph and just toss the whole thing? Like,
Well, I wouldn't say that. I'm talking more about if definitely the 10% is a glaring aspect of the letter, like you said, like Graham said, it will make them uncomfortable, and I think the
I mean, clearly
question,
it's provocative.
right? It is provocative, and and the truth is, I don't know what council will completely respond to this. I'm just, my goal, and I think Karen's goal is we strongly want to support the board, or feel that the board is that the underlying goals of the letter are important. I also want to make sure that we address what, like I said earlier, what is our role, right? So at this point, this is very much focused on Longmont Police Department. This letter is, and what role do we have in this effort? I was telling Karen, I mean, I'd like to see the board take a deeper look at what, equity, inclusion, diversity is beyond just, we have a table and people say, yeah, I have a person of color on the board, which I think is important, but I think it needs to go deeper than that. For example, in my mind, we could add a question in the application around, so what does equity look like in your programs, or how is there equity in your outcomes type of question, to have our nonprofit partners think about it. I guess that's what we're thinking about. We want this to be a successful effort, and maybe success is not defined. Maybe success is the uncomfort. I don't know. But I'm going. That's my perspective.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of value to pushing it and making it uncomfortable and having it be provocative, because otherwise it's just one of those like, yeah, we need to not be racist kind of letters, right? Do I really think that council's going to take 10% out of the police budget and give it to Housing and Human Services? No, but I think it's a hugely important conversation to have, and hopefully this is incendiary enough that they will have that conversation.
And if they say no, they're going to have to tell us why.
Right.
So,
And other alternatives.
Yep.
If they say no,
Which is why I think like a call to action section might be helpful too, because then like we can try and accomplish some things, although it might water it down. So I kind of went back and forth on this issue. I don't know.
So I think Eliberto, this group is saying we want to kick the door in.
Yeah.
So,
well, and again,
sorry, buddy.
No, and that's why I think it's important to remove unanimous, because it won't be, and that's okay.
yeah.
Okay. And we'll have to see what the outcomes of that are.
Can we make sure and get all the key edits that were from your letter, Deanna?
Yeah. So let me.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on Madeline's, and then I can switch over to Deanna's. I mean, I wrote stuff down that I will try, and I mean, I may not be able to wordsmith it, but I will at least put comments on it around, call to action, around, do we potentially, what I wrote down is, do we, to Madeline's point, do we restructure the letter, or, move paragraphs around and things like that. That's what my notes are saying right now. And then maybe we have a final conversation at the board meeting next week that we have to still set up. So is there anything else about this letter before I show you?
So before we move on, I guess, can we just step back to this restructuring of the letter a little bit, like,
Okay.
and sort out, to Madeline's point, whether it makes sense to move okay, so if we have the 10%, I'm not speaking in complete sentences, but let me give it a shot. So if we move the 10% request to the end of the letter, is it more likely that people are going to read through it and have an open mind? Or do we want to start it off with like a POW 10% and here's why? I don't know.
I'm trying to pull it up. I've lost my.
I think you got to start with the POW. I mean, and that's why I put it in the first paragraph, was that you lead in with what are you asking? If in the first 5 to 7 sentences you can't communicate the core of your issue, then you lose my attention.
Yeah, I agree. Which is
And
why
it really isn't that long. So to that end, in terms of restructuring it, I think I agree. Like I want it to be confrontational and, as I said, incendiary to a certain extent. So I don't know that we need to restructure it to move paragraphs around too much,
Okay.
in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I wrote it that way on purpose, but I was just saying I don't have any vested interest if it could be more effective to move a sentence or a paragraph, and it's going to work. I don't have anything tied to it.
I mean, I think it flows really well the way it is, Madeline.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to see yours.
I mean, really,
I'd like to see.
I just worked off of grants and added a couple of sentences in. I added a paragraph about, undertaking some feedback from groups who have experiences with the police department, and I had added in those couple sentences about maintaining programs such as Lead Core and the Angel Initiative. But that's really the only difference from Graham's letter.
So
yeah, that's probably going to be a concern. So if we could find a place to add it, because I did I used grants basically as the basis for it, everything I wrote. So yeah, but I think to add, because that was a concern that was expressed during the meeting, but I don't think people knew that the funding was aside from what we were asking.
Right.
Did you think that they were able to separate those, or did they know that, or what?
I don't think the group knew that, and I think that's why Councilwoman Polly had us read that, had it forwarded.
Yeah. So to add that in somehow, somewhere.
Here's the piece.
There you are. Okay.
I like both of those. I like them. Yeah, I say we just add those.
Right. Yeah.
I realize I said people experiencing homelessness, and I know that may not be the correct term. Maybe we should be using unhoused. I just basically copied this from the minutes.
Yeah, that's the general term right now. It's not, the previous term was homeless people, and then it's now people experiencing homelessness.
I'd put them both in. I'd do a slash unhoused home, because I think unhoused is too politically correct to me.
Yeah, it's not a politically correct condition. Word.
Exactly.
Yeah, unhoused sounds softer, and homelessness is
real.
It's just like this letter. We can't dress this thing up.
No, we can't. And that's what's going to get, unfortunately, that's what it's going to take to get their attention. You know, it's just the way it is. The truth of the matter. And that's, we want to get their attention. We don't want, you know, we don't want it, like we said initially, this needs to be uncomfortable.
What about the undertaking of comprehensive analysis piece? That's the other piece that you added.
I mean, that really I just added to Grant's final paragraph, but like I don't know that we need to like reiterate that somewhere else in Madeline's letter, right? Like, because I already suggested it above. Like, I don't think we necessarily need to say it twice.
Okay. So just really add, you're saying really add these two pieces.
I mean, that's okay with me. I wrote them.
Yeah, I say we add those. As long as it stays under 2 pages.
Right. I agree.
Right. Yeah, really.
I got to say, this conversation didn't go the direction I thought it would. I thought everybody was thinking the letter was too strong and we had to soften it, but maybe, you know, a week of everybody thinking about it will sort of come with a different perspective.
I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about the 10% issue, Grant. Like I a lot of Grant, over the last, you know, however long it's been. So it was thought provocative for me as a human, for sure.
Yeah, we've been thinking and talking a lot about it too, and I still have my concerns, and maybe that is okay. And Karen will have her concerns, and other board members will have their concerns. And again, which is why we're removing the unanimous piece, because we may not reach consensus on this. You know, it may have to be a majority.
Eliberto, will we be able to pull up the document? Will we be able to pull up the document like you have and edit it in real time so we can get to something we can get through?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see why not. I mean, this is easy enough for me to do. I mean, it'll probably go out, and it'll also go out with the packet. You know, last time it didn't, and I'm not sure there's anything else on the agenda for this special meeting that we're going to call next week. I'll check with Brian, but I think this is the agenda. I think this subcommittee was tasked by the board to do what it's doing, revising. But if this is where the subcommittee wants to go, you know, then this is where the subcommittee wants to go.
Is our advisor, what's your read on it?
Well, I think I've shared my concerns. You know, so I hope that it doesn't stymie the conversation. You know, it feels a little police heavy, and not as much about our role, the human service side of it. So that's my concern. It just feels very police heavy, and almost punitive to a certain extent. I don't think it's meant to be punitive, but it does come off a little punitive.
Oh.
Because like I said earlier, we're in a budget crunch. They just said we're 11 million in a hole. So to take 10%, somebody has to go.
Well, I mean, I can't speak to that. I mean, $21 million, you know, I haven't seen the breakdown, but I gotta believe there's some large chunks in there that don't require layoffs.
That was my thinking as well.
Yeah, and I don't know. I can't answer that question.
I guess that would be but don't you think that would be, is there any way for us to know that? Can we, what will it take to dig so we can know that? Because otherwise we're kind of going in blindly, saying things, but it would be more comfortable for us, you know, to know. Is there a way to know that, Alberto?
That's a great question. I off the top of my head, I don't know. I could definitely explore with Karen and try and dig that up between here and next week.
That
we-
would be very helpful.
Can we ask the chief of police and just say, hey man, like 10%, would you have to lay off people? What do you think about 10%?
Yeah. What would this do?
Can we invite him to the meeting?
That's another great question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write those down. You know,
Yeah.
I imagine a chief of police has some pretty thick skin that he would be able to look at this and us going to him and saying, hey, we're drafting this letter and we want to get your feedback before we send it to council. Can you give us
Right.
5 or 10 minutes of your reflections or thoughts on this so we can make a
Mhm.
more effective, like join with us? And then maybe it's an even more effective letter.
Yeah.
Not to say
Yeah.
he'll agree, but
Mhm.
Right. Oh, we'll get a sense though, but we'll definitely get a sense.
I can totally I can talk to Karen about it and see what she thinks. So, but just so you know, right now there's an interim police chief because Mike
Right. Yeah.
retired as of July 3rd, and Rob Spenlow is currently the interim public safety chief. So, but I can definitely talk to Karen about her thoughts on inviting the police chief or the not I guess public safety chief to the meeting. Did I get that right?
the public, yeah.
Yeah, because police is one. So public safety has both fire and police.
Mm. Mhm.
Okay. So anything else? Yeah, I've shared my concerns. I've heard yours, and I think that, you know, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the board responds. And again, I will have the conversation with Karen and see how she responds to get her feedback as well. But I just want to make sure that the subcommittee, you know, I've taken some notes and I can write something up and we can put it in the packet. And just want to make sure that the subcommittee is good where we are now. Adding these two pieces to it, we're going to leave the structure as is in Madeline's. So going back to Madeline's, I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to go back to Madeline's. Are we saying that we don't need that call to action, that because of the way we're doing it, we don't need that call to action, Graham? I'm going to go back to Madeline's.
I think that's right. We
Yeah.
don't need it because we've included Deanna's paragraph about soliciting feedback and includes those
Okay.
items I was thinking would fit there. So that's good.
Okay. And where do you think, just to help me, because I'll put this together, but where do you think that, between which two paragraphs should we add those?
Let me see.
And then I have a question about this sentence. I mean, I read it, but now I'm reading it again. And Madeline, I'd love to get your thoughts on what is, in your mind, what does this look like? I want to highlight it here.
Yeah. Not being committed. We extended gratitude for our hard working, well-intentioned, and much needed police force. Saying that in those particular like it says, in situations that are more health related, more mental illness related as opposed to crime, we need to have that special, there's another element of employee or a worker that would address those kinds of situations. And it's important that we identify it, and kind of restructure to fit those situations. I'll give you a perfect example. In Memphis, there was, and this was a few years back, but to show that police officers were not trained to handle calls that were more related to mental illness as opposed to a crime. Mm-hmm. And they ended up shooting the guy because they thought their interpretation of what was going on was completely different and was totally in line with what they were trained to recognize. They were not trained to recognize mental illness. And so when they perceived him to be coming toward them, although there were many feet between them and him, they took it that their lives were in danger. When in fact, if we looked at that today, probably not. That situation, that man would probably still be alive.
Right. Okay.
So.
Okay. So maybe that's where it belongs. So I guess where the reason I asked is because where I'm struggling is I totally see what you're saying, and how do we recognize? So that's exactly the situation where lead and core would fit in, right? That's their role, to have a mental health provider to address someone going through a mental health crisis or substance abuse. And so I guess is that where we put it in? We were saying, while we recognize that Longmont has these great programs, and then we still recognize the efficacy of taking police out of the equation. I just want to make sure that those things are not too what's the word I want to use here? That they jive well, right? Because so we're saying here in this statement, we're saying that we got to get police out of it, but then we also say, but we recognize that police has really good programs to address mental health and substance use issues.
Yeah, after I wrote this, I had a conversation with someone yesterday, I think, or day before. It was subsequent to me writing this. And they told me that when they get calls where it's suspected that it's more of a mental illness situation, that on calls like that the police don't go out alone anyway.
Right.
Is that true?
Yeah, well, that's what CORE is all about. It's called co-responders. So
okay.
So if police get a call that says, we have someone that is doing that is associated with mental health issues, then dispatch and the police officers immediately get connected with the co-responder. And I've seen it happen here in I was going to go get coffee, and there was a gentleman outside Ziggy's, and you could definitely tell he was having some type of psychotic event. And there was a police officer there, but more importantly, there was a couple of co-responders, mental health professionals there as well, trying to de-escalate the situation using their mental health skills.
Yes.
So that's my, how do we jive that together? So I totally recognize that's a true statement. And it's also true that Longmont's a little different because we do have these programs.
Well, maybe there we would alter it just a bit to say, let's create a partnership, or let's state it as a partnered effect.
Okay.
would be more more in line with what we're suggesting, what we're thinking. Yeah, so that yeah, let's alter that.
I'm gonna just in red, just for me, for notes.
And then maybe add Deanna's stuff as the next paragraph.
Yeah, there we go.
And I think those are great programs, and I give a lot of credibility to the police department for taking the initiative on those. But I don't think they're great programs necessarily because the police are involved with them, right? Like those would be great programs without police involvement. So I think they could be administered by somebody else.
Right, and you put that there, and again, I think that's a. I don't know if we can address it completely in this letter. I have my concerns about who else could do it.
Yeah.
You know, in particular, because, and this goes to a bigger issue. So that, let's talk about that grant money, right? You know, the police got that grant money because whoever those grant makers are doing it, there's been a lot of grant money that goes to police, to that larger conversation that Graham's talking about, value proposition, right? Part of the reason that the police got that grant money is because those grants are specifically set aside for police assisted diversion, right? And they can apply for those. And there's a lot of commitment to integrate police with mental health services. That's not just in Longmont. There is a movement out there around that. So a regular nonprofit couldn't access those grants, is what I'm trying to get to.
Okay, so the police weren't administering those programs. But you know, honestly, this is a problem for city council to sort out, right? Because I'm not
yeah.
council's budget.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
And there were, you know, along those lines, there were a number of things I read in the minutes, and I wrote them down as sort of highline things that might be edit worthy. And I think that, you know, I'll read them off here, that how much money are we asking for? How is it distributed?
Right.
Where from the police fund does it come from, et cetera, et cetera. Those, I feel like the answer is that's city council's job to do that. And we could spin our wheels trying to figure it out for them, but we're just trying to say, hey, there's a human service crisis here, and we need to move the funds from the militarization of departments within the city to the support and care of basic human needs. So yeah, we can let the city, if council wants us to figure that out, then that's another question, but
yeah, let them ask us.
Let them ask.
Yeah. You know, one other thing I was thinking, and I said it the other night, and it keeps coming back. As much as I try to shake it out of my head, it keeps popping back up. And and that is, what if they say, well, you know, we can do maybe 2% or 3% from the police, safely from the police budget, but over in XYZ's budget, we have a lot more flexibility. So are we really limiting ourselves by identifying where we think it should come from, or should we have a caveat in there some kind of way to say, well, yeah, while this is what we recommend it because, however, if you know somewhere else, if you are aware of a source that would be able to accomplish this, and yet, and you know, basically, I'm thinking we don't really care where it comes from, as long as we, you know, are able to. Of course, we care. I didn't mean that literally, but are we locking ourselves? You get what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely. And I think we should add that in the end somewhere, that, you know, that says, you know, the main point of this is to get funding for human services. So if people who are wiser and more knowledgeable than us can find some other place other than the police department, then great.
So be it. Have at it.
So be it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because that's what, you know, I really, in all my years, I I appreciate it much more somebody giving me the problem and don't tell me how to solve it. You know, you give me the problem, let me come up with solutions, and then we come back together and you tell me why my solutions or my suggestions are not feasible. And then let's work up an alternative to that. I always appreciated that much more than being dictated to. You know, so that's well, as long as you get what I'm trying to say anyway. Yeah.
And Ellie Berto, I would like to add to that main point clause, if you will, that this need pre-existed COVID, but that we have evidence that says that there is a exaggerated or escalated urgency and a need in human services because of COVID.
Because of COVID, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and then maybe we're saying that this is at least for 2020. Maybe we don't touch on, 2021. Maybe we don't touch on the duration and let council figure that out. But you could make an argument to say, this is what we're asking for the next 2 fiscal years or whatever it is.
So that's a great point.
Yeah.
I actually was talking to Karen because she was asking me, so what do I think? And I said, again, I have my concerns about the 10%. I've made that clear. I also want to respect that that's where the subcommittee wants to go. But my suggestion to Karen was, what I would ask council is, can you keep us whole? Right? I understand that there is a huge budget issue crisis. Not only is there a human service crisis, there's also a budget crisis in the city, right? $11 million in the general fund and other funds is nothing to shake a stick at. And we were scheduled to go to 2.7% in 2021. But 2.7%, while it's an increase in percentage from 2020, doesn't mean much if the general budget goes down by 10%, right? And so my suggestion is, with council, and again, to Madeline's point, I don't care where it comes from, right? So, if police had extra funding, that would be great. But could council keep us whole and at least keep us at 2020 numbers? Or whichever is higher, even though I sincerely doubt, and Karen said, why don't we ask for the 3% straight out and skip the incremental growth? But even 3% doesn't mean that it would be the same amount that we got this year, right? Because it's 3% of less.
Right.
And so my suggestion would be, keep us whole at 2020 levels, or 3%, whichever is higher.
Sounds good to me. Sounds good to me.
So I'll put that down.
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud again and wondering, it's just kind of marinating in my brain right now. And I'm thinking, well, what if you went across the board, and what would it do to take 0.0555005 from 7 or 6 budgets, after analyzing, the everything. I mean, there are more ways to do this than there's no. I think if we don't lock them in to one thing and allow them to just explore possibilities that make it more feasible to get it accomplished, it could be a lot easier, than what it feels like right now. That's what I'm thinking.
Right. Well, and I'm going to go kind of against, well, okay, so how do I do this? I don't want to contradict myself because I do have a concern for 10%. So the point of 10%, if I understand you all correctly, is that it's really to make council uncomfortable, right? To kick in the door, as Graham said earlier, on the conversation on what? The structural racism, the need for increased funding. What? So I guess that's my question. What is the goal of the 10%, asking for transfers of 10% from the Longmont Police Department's budget?
10% seemed like a good round number to me. 10% of anything is not, I mean, you could probably remove 10% of my body and I'd still be functional. It just seemed like a good round number, but definitely impactful. So
right, and I understand that.
And the point is twofold. It is, I mean, Brian was very good about making the point of, there's a funding issue, right? And then there's a police issue. And I get that you can pull those apart, but in the sense that it is a value proposition, I think that they're wed. I think that they're together. So for me, the biggest issue is the funding. I'm a member of the the HSAB board, and there's a funding crisis, and we need funding to care for our community. And then the other part of me says, where should it come from? Well, not knowing anything, just being, a member of the community, I would say, well, let's get it from the police, right? They're here to protect and serve, and there's a whole segment of the community that needs to be protected and served with dollars, and the police have them. And
right,
there's this inflection point in society where we're reevaluating our police departments and really trying to hold them accountable and say, you guys need to stop being racist and killing people. And so the way to do that is to take their money, and that will force that reevaluation, right?
right.
So that's why I think they're connected.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we don't. I'm trying to thread a very narrow line, right? Because I totally agree with the human services, and I also totally agree with the continued reform and improvement and anti-racism work that needs to happen in the PD and in fact in all of us. I mean, I think we need to be very honest about, like I said when I talked about earlier, our own home here, our own house. How do we make sure that equity and how do we break down structural racism within our own work? So I'm very committed to that, and I also very committed to, my concern is when they in this letter, the way that they're married, for lack of a better word, I'm just concerned about how it's going to fall, and I could be totally wrong, and I totally admit that. And ultimately, it's not even my decision; it's yours, and I think you guys have made yourself clear. I'm just trying to ask the questions and advise the group on, like, we need to be very, very clear and thoughtful and around where is it we want to go.
I think the takeaway from this letter has got to be, we need more money. I mean, that's the simplest part of it. And 10% from the police department is, a good way to get everybody's attention and get them to think about it and, do the work that needs to be done to figure it out. If there was nothing in there about the police department, then council would be like, where are you going to get the money? Where do you want us to take it? And, give us some direction, right?
Yeah. You know what? That's it. Another thought was, I want to make sure this is not a part of our thought process, or if it is, if there isn't, and that is there any portion of us that's identified the police department as the source to pull from, because of the state of affairs of our nation, and particularly with the to hold them more accountable with what has, what sparked all of this in the first place, which is the Black Lives Matter, Are we trying to make a statement in that regard to hold them accountable, or not, and just say, here's what we want. We want more money going toward the human services aspect of our community, and we don't care where it comes from. Is that?
That's my struggle, Madeline.
Yeah.
I think those things are linked, and I don't think you can unlink them, right? Like, part of the problem is that as a society, and maybe this problem is not very pronounced in Longmont because we've had a great chief for a long time. We don't know who the new chief is going to be, and we don't know what's going to happen, right? I mean, I hope it's going to continue. But I think these things are sort of linked, and that we have prioritized funding police to do things that police shouldn't necessarily be doing, right? And so if the police aren't doing those things, which is a whole sea change that is difficult to accomplish logistically, I understand that. But I don't know, to me, these things seem to be sort of linked, and that you have to sort of reframe how you're thinking about how you address social service needs.
Yeah, I mean, just think about, the new PC title of the police department, public safety. I mean, we could be the public safety board, really. I mean, if you want to play with meaning and names, feeding people and tending to their mental health and their education and their addiction and all the things that this board seeks to fund, that's public safety. And so this letter should, I don't want it to look punitive, Eliberto. It's not punitive. It's about,
Right.
Hey, the police department and Housing and Human Services are working on the same problems. And right now, we need some of those funds to shift to this side of the coin.
Right.
And so they are linked, Deanna, and trying to communicate that is a real art here, because it's a positive message here. It's not, I don't want it to be anti-police, you know what I mean? I want it to be
Right.
anti-militarized group of people running around Longmont, bringing force where there needs to be brought care.
Yeah. You know what, Graham, with you saying that, something else just hit my brain, and I'm thinking, okay, we don't want it to be punitive. On the other hand, we do, at the same time, need to send the message, and I don't know if it would be in this effort that we would do that, but we do want them to know, we do want that accountability. We do want that up. We do want that to be prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But we don't. However, we do that without being punitive, and maybe just, I don't know, a little more thought and more work. Maybe I could come up with something, or we could come up with something. But given the state of affairs, we're saying change has to come. Now, are we going to use this reallocation or as a part of it? If we do, and if we are, I think we need to be real subtle in that element of it. But on the other hand, really, really structured and focused and decided on the flip side.
Right.
So it's kind of tough, But we don't want to be. We don't want to come down, or make it have any semblance of appearance that that's what we're doing, because I don't think we are.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's our intent. But I guess the message, I think it's going to be broad enough to, some are going to think that regardless.
Right.
Agreed.
So we can't really be overly concerned about that. But at the same time, we have to, just state it as it is. I mean, there was a man that was shot last week, African-American man in Longmont by the police. I mean, it's still happening. And then when you, so I don't know. Yeah, it's a lot. But I think our direction and for what you said about, well, what's our charge? What's our charge? And that's pretty much where we have to stay focused. Otherwise, it's so easy to slip into all of those other very necessary categories,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel that I think we have done a great job, though, of identifying and adding teeth, a little more teeth into what we set out to do. And I don't know what do you think, Alberto?
Well, again, I'm going to continue to struggle with this and continue to read through it, and I will take the changes that you all made, and we will bring it back to our whole meeting. And during that meeting, if you all see, if you think that I didn't, faithfully implement what we talked about today, feel free to speak up and say, well, no, I think this is more what we were thinking. I will do my best. I've captured notes. This is being recorded. I can go back and listen to it as well. But I will do my best to capture what we've talked about, and at the same time, to Graham's point, try to keep it to under 2 pages.
Yeah,
right?
for
So
sure.
I will do my best to do that.
Yeah, and we have faith in you. We know you will.
Yep. I believe in you, Alberto.
Absolutely. I have one last request. Do you think it would be possible for us to see the final draft?
Yeah, I think so. I'll ask.
you present it to council? Before you present it to our board, the board.
Yeah, I was gonna say the council, of course. You guys have to vote on it.
Yeah.
But I think you can do that to the subcommittee, and I'll send it to you, buying copies, so you can all see it, and then you can all respond to me. I think that's possible.
Okay, good.
I'll check with Karen to make sure, and if I can't, I'll let you know.
Okay, yeah. I'd just like to see what's going to be given to them that's as a result of our effort, the subcommittee's effort, before it's, so we can just communicate among ourselves and to you directly if there are any significant changes before being presented to them.
And I think that's the concern, is if there's so the concern is, are we having an email meeting, right?
You mean just us, just the four of us?
So I think that you could email me, but you couldn't email each other. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Okay.
There's too many of us, and we'll trigger the sunshine laws.
Exactly. So if you reply all, or if you include, let's say, Madeline, that I write it, and Madeline, you have issues, and you include Deanna and Graham, all of a sudden that's an online meeting, and then that becomes an issue.
Oh,
and they'll call the police.
They'll call the police on us, right? Yeah. So we just want to stay clear. We just want to stay clear of any of that. So for example, if maybe the way it can work is I will send it to you individually, and if you all have suggestions or whatever, you can get them back to me, and I can try and incorporate them, and then you'll all see it together when the board sees it.
Okay, and that's fine. I don't like getting surprised. That's all. I like to avoid any surprises, especially among just us.
Right. So I think I can do it that way. I would just ask that you only communicate with me.
Yeah, that's good.
And then that keeps that. I think that keeps us within the spirit and letter of the law.
Okay. Yeah. That accomplishes what I want, and that's just to know before presenting it to the whole board.
Yeah, I'll try to get it out before the end of this week sometime.
When's our meeting? Our meeting's Friday.
Well, we have to decide. I think Karen and Brian need to decide that. We said we told us the week of the 20th. So I suggested the Thursday night, which is kind of a regular, but I don't think that's been decided yet. And I think that's Brian and Karen decided that.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I just like to know, what we're doing before it being put before a group of folk. Because if we're gonna disagree or anything like that, I'd like to do that privately among us, just the four of us. Yeah. Not that we would, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. Eliberto, if I may make 3 suggestions, you could carry on to Karen and or Brian. One is that if we get this thing finalized, Brian read it to council because he's our chair president, I
Yeah.
guess. The second one would be to invite the public safety chief officer.
I have that in notes already.
Okay, cool. And then
Okay.
the third one is, this isn't easy to group edit a document. I recommend that in terms of formatting, we do a screen share like you've done here, so somebody can in real time delete and type. And then there's a function on Zoom where you can like put a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And I wonder if we utilize that throughout the editing process, just to keep a running tally of where the votes stand on the letter. So that any given changes, we can see, okay, we have a majority now. Oh, we added that. Now we've lost some people. There's still 3 people who thumbs down. Okay, those 3 people need to speak and tell us, what their issues are with the letter. You know what I mean? To really make it, because we're only going to have, a couple hours, not a couple days. So.
Right.
Okay. I'll talk to Nicole about that function. I admit I am not a Zoom expert, so.
Oh yeah, but that's all doable. I agree with what you said. I mean, in terms of features, Alberto.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Anything else?
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys. Thank
All
you
right.
guys.
Thank you all. I will try and
Thank
get
you
this
all.
out as soon as I can.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
All right.
Thank you guys. Great work.
Thank you.
Guys.
All right. Thank you all.
Have a good day.
All right. You too. Bye bye.